Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Luigi Rebuffi, Secretary General of EXO, and welcome to this session of the Cybersecurity Summer Hub concerning the topic of Europe's cybersecurity policy landscape. Is enough being done to drive the European market for cybersecurity? This session will last about 45 minutes. And has been, of course, organized by Forum Europe with the support of EXO and Women for Cyber. In this session, we will have 5 important speakers. So Apo Sederberg, CEO and founder of Cyberwatch in Finland, Johan Lepassar, which is the executive director of ENISA, Luis Alvarez Torre, CEO of SIA, now in Indra, Nina Ivarinen, head of corporate relations at Secure Corporation, and Charlotte Grea, head of business development and partnership of Airbus Cybersecurity, but which still have some connection problem. Hopefully she will be with us very soon. So the panel will develop us for the following. I will give the floor for a few minutes to each of the participants to introduce 3 main topics. And then we will go for a discussion among the panelists, and of course we will also collect questions from the attendees and we'll try to give an answer. The panels will see how the policy can tackle the fragmentation in Europe's cybersecurity, how this can promote innovation and competitiveness, what are the investment needed, how to encourage investment for products and services following the need of the market, and how we can enhance trust and information sharing across the different stakeholders. So we start immediately with Apo Sederberg, and as I said, is CEO and founder of Cyberwatch from Finland. Apo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Luigi, and thank you for this great opportunity to speak today. I have 3 points in my opening remarks. I start with the global view of the cyber world. So what is happening in the cyber world at the moment? I think it's a challenge for everyone and for us to follow the challenges. And perhaps the main thing which is worrying at the moment, cyber space is becoming more and more a political tool. And as we know, when it's a political tool, it's also a military tool. And the fragmentation of the global internet. So China is building own internet, Russia is building own the internet, and they are saying that US led internet, that it's a US internet. So the question is, what about Europe? And what does this mean for us in Europe? How should we be able to respond? And when, for political reasons, if we are having 3 independent internet, it might mean that it's used in military terms. So we have to be prepared for the situation when our communication, the normal communication like this conference, we are not able to run it because the internet is coming a war room, and it can be cut for political reasons or military reasons. So this is the challenge. So what should we be doing here in Europe? And my second point is actually, and it's also a proposal. So we in Europe, we should have shared strategic situation awareness on global cyberspace. So like we are collecting intelligence information, we have an intelligence cell for the EU collecting information and then sharing it to the member states. So why are we not creating a cell which is collecting strategic information on cyberspace? I don't mean operational information, but the shells are doing that. Such another thing. But then what are the big drivers in the cyberspace and how we should be able to respond? That, in my view, could give a good advantage for us and would create Europe more competitive in the global sense. So my proposal is that why don't we give this role to ENISA? The new role or ENISA should be strengthened, and they could create a coordination cell and we could the national contribution could be given to ENISA, and then ENISA could should analyze and combine a report, a weekly or monthly report for us that our governments and our decision makers on national level are better prepared for the changes in the cyber world. So that's in my view of utmost importance. The third point is the European digital independence, which I'm a little bit worried. What does it mean? I mean, the big question is, what is the European cybersecurity culture? So how we are behaving. And cybersecurity, as we all know, it's different from other parts of security because it's not just the security authorities, it's all of us. It's people, it's companies, it's organizations, it's governments. So how we are able to involve and create the same cybersecurity culture for all levels. And it means that we have to be able to introduce the security culture. So which parts of our communication are important, which should be more protected, and how to do it. So we rely on the global goods and commons, and at the same time there's a need for new innovation and new solutions and change in the culture. So my proposal is that looking what we have been doing for the critical infrastructure protection, we should now at the EU level redefine the critical infrastructure, and cybersecurity is definitely a supercritical infrastructure because it's connected to all other parts of the critical infrastructure. And if that's not working, then the whole Europe is not working. And I could, in a way, take a reference to the Corona crisis. So we have seen what the global crisis means. So we can image what the cyber crisis it's having the same impact what Corona have had in our culture. So that's why Europe needs better cybersecurity culture to be more competitive in the global competition. So they are my opening thoughts. I thank you.
Thank you, Apo. I see that you started very strongly, already challenging the next speaker.
That was the
challenging the next speaker. So Johan Lepassa, which is the executive director of ENISA. So you already asked him what you proposed him some new role for ENISA. Johan, tell us more a little bit how you see ENISA now. What have you learned in this at the COVID, and now what are the next steps for you?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure also to chip into this conversation. The challenge that Apo posed to me is already accepted. Indeed, I think the 2 points that I would like to start with is what can we learn from the current crisis and how will it affect us? As Apo said, common situational awareness is something that underpins our unified action in the cyberspace. And I'm very happy that in this crisis, this is something that already has started. So in the framework of the blueprint, which is a political framework of how the Union should respond and raise its resilience vis-a-vis large-scale cross-border cyber incidents, we have the opportunity also to exchange information and set up an information exchange with different entities who deal with cybersecurity at the Union level. So we, over the course of last 2 months, we regularly met and issued reports together with Europol, the Commission, External Action Service, CERT-EU, and shared this with the NIS Cooperation Group. And this is something that very much helped to shape the understanding and also the responses of national and EU authorities. And this is really something that builds on the trust that has been built over a course of a decade between the national authorities, the CCERT network, which is the network of national computer emergency response teams. It wouldn't have happened overnight, but I think that in the current context, it's the first time we were able to use it proactively. The CCERT network was on alert mode. There was not, yes, we saw an uptick of cyber attacks against health sector, but there was not such a large-scale cross-border cyber crisis. And part of it, the resilience that we built over the course of last years is part of the reason why there wasn't a huge, let's say, gap emerging in our cyber response. And this is, of course, something that can be consolidated. And I hope that the Commission, when they come up with the concept of the joint cyber union, also is able to say, put some of these experiences into this new concept. I think the other parts which we saw is the huge and rapid digitalization of workspace and business space and economy. Essentially, it has never been the case that such a huge majority of people are forced to digitalize their everyday activities. And of course, this raised cybersecurity also at the forefront, but it was not, cybersecurity was not the first concern of people who started to telework first time ever, or people who started to do video conferences, or businesses who rapidly wanted to digitalize their retail networks, because, well, some of them, they just wanted to survive, some of them wanted to start working, and they were struggling with balancing the work life and professional life. So they tried to make do. And what we experienced and what we saw is that there is still quite a way to go in order to ensure that cybersecurity is something that is intrinsically built into ICT products or services. We saw an uptake of services that are not as cyber secure as they could be or should be. And the question for us is really, yes, one of the aspects of this is cyber awareness and cyber hygiene, but shouldn't there be something in terms of the framework that incentivizes the manufacturers or service providers to make sure that their products or services are cyber secure from the start, cyber secure by default? And I think this is something that we can also perhaps debate today, how to do that best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Well, I have a number of questions already rising up after the first two interventions, but we'll see them later. Now we move to, we move somehow to the private sector, the companies. Luis, so you are now the CEO of SIA, which has recently been bought by Indra, the Spanish company. So tell us how you see from this new position. You also have a wide experience in the past on BT, so you know the sector. Now tell us how to move on with this completely new situation in the new position.
Yeah, and if you would like to ask me for like a summary sentence of what I see, is that the bad guys, they share a lot, and the good guys less so, which means that our ability to use policy to really build a stronger European Union and having stronger enforcements of the policies of what we want to drive, and make this not only a protection tool, but also a business, an industry in itself. I think that is the biggest opportunity. So my three main points are, the first one is probably the European Union is extremely well placed to address cybersecurity. If you look to the global nature of threats, if you look to the scale and the cross-border activity that is happening, that is a very clear case for the European Union to action on this. We already have a very good amount of capabilities. Probably we could even say a vast amount of capabilities, but we have to be pragmatic. We can do the enforcement as we have tried with the NIS directive. And I think it is time to move to the next level. And with the next level, I mean that we have to become probably much more harder on how we pursue our targets. So my first recommendation would be, we do have that kind of policies. We have the framework for that. Let's create a European cybersecurity dashboard that is much more guidance, but also is a tool that we can use to reinforce the policies that we will try to do. The second one, on top of the ability of the European Union to drive policies, is to make sure that we have companies as part of the ecosystem and organizations. I think EXO is a great example, where we really use the policies to drive, and this is our belief in Indra and in SIA, we can really drive innovation, we can drive investments, and there are areas in which we have differentiation. We created ADAS, that is a reference for digital signature. We can do things on digital onboarding as well, and people identification is a major area. In that sense, probably the recent Cybersecurity Act that is enforcing the creation through ENISA of certification schemes is a major opportunity for us to drive a whole industry, a whole ecosystem. And my third point is that this current situation presents a unique opportunity for us to take not only a nice role within the European framework, but also on a global basis. We can really become a global leader. So I think we have to be bolder on our ambitions. To me, there are specific things that we could do. I think that creating a rating of how states are cybersecurity ready to face the challenges and also to support each other is a critical area. We have tried over a number of years with some of the policies that we have put in place, and I mentioned the NIS directive. Also, we have tried to share more information. I think there is a space to improve that so that we can really share. Although we have made some progress, there is still room for improvement in that area. We can create, and we must create, a central inventory of critical infrastructure at the European level so that we can protect that and we have faster ability to respond to the challenges. And I will be delighted that during the questions, I can give you more ideas about what I see. So in summary, I think Europe is well placed to drive policies for cybersecurity. We have already a number of assets that we could build on to accelerate our presence. This is more an industry and ecosystem opportunity as well. And third, this can be an opportunity not only to do things locally or regionally, is to do things on a global basis and become really a global leader through the implementation of those policies.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Luis, for your contribution. So now let's move to Nina Ivarinen. So I remind she is the head of corporate relation in F-Secure. F-Secure being probably the largest pure player in Europe on cybersecurity. So Nina, you have also experience also from the public sector, so you can combine the two views.
Thank you, Luigi. And perhaps I will start with something that Luis was talking about policies. And that reminded me of something that Bruce Schneier has said, that if the policymakers get the tech wrong, they won't get the policy right. And that's why we really encourage and support these kind of like public-private discussions, that we need to bring not only the public players, but also bring the private sector and private players and actors into the discussion. But when we talk about the European cybersecurity market and industry, I have actually two kind of numbers in mind, 21 and 5. It has been estimated that the size of the European cybersecurity market is 21%, and that the share of purely European cybersecurity players in the global market is only 5%. So I think before we really start also like looking at how we can support the European cybersecurity market and industry, we should really understand the market and share of the purely European players in this market. This has also, and is very closely linked to the discussion on strategic value change and strategic capabilities. And really analyze that what are those strategic capabilities that we need in Europe? Do we have them? And if we don't, how we acquire them? And I think here, players and organizations like ENISA and EXO can be really instrumental in these discussions. And this really is linked to the resilience and the preparedness that how prepared we are to face the global challenges. And to really start looking at those areas where Europe can excel and where we have excellence, because there are a lot of things where we won't be able to catch up with some of the biggest global players. But there are areas where we have really strong capabilities and strengths, like artificial intelligence and cybersecurity, and how those are interlinked. On industrial data side, how we can really use that and build a new business and strengthen our competitiveness in Europe. And this is, of course, then coming to my kind of third point, very closely linked to breaking down the silos. And this has already been something that Aapo, Johan, and Luis were also talking about, like really breaking down silos and how we mainstream cybersecurity to everything we do. Like European Commission has made the proposal on EU for Health. Cybersecurity is very much and very linked to the if we talk about health data, can there be anything more sensitive as data type as health data? When we talk about data spaces, securing the data is obvious. And also like talking about hardware and software, that was something that was already touched upon by other speakers. So perhaps that's as a starting point from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Yeah, there are certain points that I will come back later. I also have to say that Charlotte Creer from Airbus, which was foreseen to be in a panel, unfortunately, she cannot join us for technical reason. The messages she wanted to give, we already discussed before. She was talking to me that she would have highlighted the need for skills. Cybersecurity. In cybersecurity, we definitely need a huge number of experts, a growing number of experts, which are not available today. So we have both to rise the young generation from school and also to the career change to bring along, let's say, more expert people in other domain, but to bring it to cybersecurity, and not all necessarily having done STEM studies. And also, she was mentioning to me the need for procurement of European solution, particularly for certain sensitive applications. So now let's start this discussion. We have something like 20 minutes. We have a number of questions, but first of all, I would like to come back to what some of you mentioned concerning. Well, Johan spoke about the fact that they had the share of information among different institutions, so among the Commission and member states and so on. But what about sharing also information with the private sector, and with whom you have shared information? I mean, did you share also outside Europe? What's the point? Because we have a number of members from EXO, from private sector, from operators saying we see every day the size, especially the size of this. We see every day threats, and we need to share this not only with the national asserts. We need to share among us, and even at wider level, at European level.
Thank you. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's not only a public sector matter, but it's also how the public sector relates to private sector players who are in most cases, on the forefront of this, and they are on the, let's say, the first ones who see and detect, but also pay the consequences quite a lot. And I think this is also a lesson learned from the current crisis, is that we do have some mechanism, and we are very, very hard working with some sectors to set up ISACs, which are the information sharing and analysis centers. But the governance of the NIS directive does not now foresee a good and structured cooperation of private sector players. And this is something I believe as well, a kind of a lesson learned, and that we can perhaps take with us into the review which the Commission has announced. There was a question I saw in the chat as well, that what kind of information that we shared. We can't, of course, disclose everything, but of course we looked into the attack types and actors and also sectors which were targeted. And I think it's already in the public domain, and it's quite widely reported as well, that what we saw mostly is, yes, the types of attacks, it was mainly phishing attacks. When it comes to actors, they were opportunistic cyber criminals. And the sectors, of course, yes, there was an uptick of the health sector, as I noted. So it was really the issue which was interesting, how much misinformation and cyber attacks go hand in hand nowadays, and how the campaign for misinformation and cyber attacks geographically followed the spread of the virus. You could really draw a map in the same way that the virus spread, the misinformation and cyber attacks went along, and they were really focusing on the most hard-hit areas. And there, I think, this kind of information sharing, having a similar understanding of the cyberspace, this awareness is important between the public and private sector, and we haven't yet cracked this nut. So I would be very clear about it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There was
comment.
Go on.
Lucy, I think this is a crucial question, and there's always the question how to build the trust between the private sector and the governments. The government said, okay, they are not allowed to share information because there is no trust, and they see the level of security in a different light. So perhaps we should be able to look this also as a procedure question. So we should have to categorize, like perhaps NISA could have a role here. What is the information that can be shared in open platforms, and then if there's confidential information, we have to create the system of sharing also with the companies the confidential information. Because many of the cyber, and it comes to my point that we have to define cyber as a critical infrastructure, because if we are dealing with the critical infrastructure protection, it means it had to be confidential. And we have to be able to create the structures, also the technical and educational structures that the private sector is able to build the trust with the public sector and share in practical terms the information. I think that's the main obstacle. And perhaps there's also a legal aspect, so we have to see the regulation a little bit, because the governments, they are always going behind the regulation, and then it's an obstacle. It might be an obstacle.
I'm glad that Apu pointed it out, because that was actually what I wanted to say, that there are always issues of vulnerabilities, but there's also disclosure of vulnerability means that whether you then are also liable for this vulnerability, and how you also make sure that this disclosure does not get misused. So I think all of these aspects are important to bear in mind. And I don't want to also give this impression that the cooperation on the information sharing between public and private sector actors doesn't happen now. It does happen, but I think the problem is, which is the theme of this panel, it's fragmented. The sectors don't talk to each other. The member states do share information, but it's mostly happening in the public sector sphere, not in vis-a-vis public and private sector. So indeed, there are a number of aspects that we still need to tackle.
And I think that this was precisely my opening remark. And I think that we should create an environment in which companies and governments should be proud of sharing, right? So that they can really confirm that, okay, we have detected this. And the first thing to do that is to encourage people that it could be incentivized, it could be rewarded, that the more you contribute, you could get some benefits, and it's possible to do that. The second thing is, and I agree with you, we have to set certain levels of information so that the faster we are able to just share a new compromise that has happened, the faster we can respond as a global community. And I think that we have the work that CERT is doing with Europol, with you, with ENISA, and I think we have to extend that to the collaboration of other CERTs of individual private companies, so that they can benefit not only from CERT or FIRST, that they can also contribute when they detect things. I think we do have that opportunity by creating those levels of information that we should share, and having that kind of dashboard that I suggested.
Yeah, maybe just add briefly to that, because it basically comes down to this what Apo was talking about in the beginning about creating European cybersecurity culture, like really to bringing the public and private together, because I think that is our strength, because we have, of course, on the private side that we get a lot of visibility to the threat landscape and what is happening before they even then maybe hit the kind of the governmental level. So I think we can be a kind of a great asset to ENISA and to your work. And you mentioned this review of NISA directive, and I think that's a great opportunity for all of us to really go through and see that what needs to be done, and really for us as industry players to see how we see that, and then have that discussion with public sector and ENISA. So let's use that as kind of redefining the procedures.
And in Nina, we do have a coming opportunity as part of the European Cybersecurity Competence Center that is now being put in place. We would be delighted, as you know, in Spain, we have a great capability, and we will submit a proposal for that. But I mean that is another opportunity of fostering this collaboration.
Okay, thank you. Well, I also realized, I've seen in our discussion also in the webinars we had with EXO, that information sharing, but also they call it threat intelligence sharing among a different level, at different layers. That's really becoming more and more in these days the key for the future, upon which you can really build the future cybersecurity in Europe. I think that's everybody's realizing this also with this crisis. Somehow maybe things are, and there is one question, by the way, if I looking at this, one question asking, I simplified a little bit the question, that there are now we are working remotely, we have different security as a service, we have to use the cloud, we have to use different tools. How much this can be is going to complexify our way of working, or how much simplify? And I would like also to link this to something that Johan said before, that we need to incentivize manufacturers in cybersecurity products, but at the same time, certain look at, for instance, SMEs or single person, which need to use the cybersecurity product or to certify cybersecurity product, which are now we confronted to new way of working, obliged maybe to go for to certify the products. How can not only incentivize them, but how can we simplify their job?
If I may start, this is a good question. In many ways, actually, Corona has been good, so it has simplified our work. We are easier. People are easier to be connected. It's easier to arrange meeting and so on. But then we are facing the problem that on what level we are able to discuss on using these remote devices. And perhaps this is something where Europe could take a lead. So we have to be able to create a secure communication system for Europe, so that when it comes to the confidential information, secret information, we can't arrange the meetings at the moment. And like we have many clients who don't want to speak using Zoom or Teams or whatever is normal devices. And this could be a great lesson to be learned, and a golden opportunity for for many of the companies, we have many good innovation in Europe. And so if we could be able to build a common secure communication system for the European main players, and in this way also connecting the private sector and public sector, then we could rise this remote working method on a totally different level. And then it could really simplify our work, and we could be more effective and more competitive in the global terms as well.
Our experience at SIA these days with working with our customers, either government or customers or private companies, there has been like 4 main areas for the remote working and how this is changing. The first one is data and applications. I think that a lot of people have realized that they are using applications from places that they didn't even know, because some of the departments, they have been buying those solutions from cloud providers in other platforms. So having the right inventory for data and application is something that is absolutely critical. The second one is network security, which I think most of the challenges for people is that suddenly you started working from home and you have never thought of having a VPN, a private network at home, or you have been even using your own router that you had before. So I think that this is an opportunity for telcos to work together, creating this cybersecurity framework for personal communications within a work environment. The third one is devices. And I think the certification that we have discussed before is going to become critical. A lot of people are using their private laptop, even with games from their kids, to do work, right? So that is a window opportunity for a lot of hackers to just enter in those systems. And finally, which I think, again, with policies we can do a lot, is people awareness and being conscious of what it means that you are going to do remote working, and you could even use open Wi-Fi when you are going to connect, and maybe those the understanding of the potential threats and risks that you could run is going to be very important. And we should be aligned at the European level of understanding those threats around those 4 items that we have realized are having these days.
Just to comment, if you are looking to applications, they are not, by the way, coming from Europe. They are coming from US. So we come to the question of our digital independence. So let's do something.
So
Maybe
I have actually.
Sorry.
Go on.
Just the issue of the SMEs, or let's say how we can have we can help the small businesses who they necessarily don't have the resources nor the capacity. I think there are 2 routes. Firstly, of course, yes, we can set norms and baselines, and certification can perhaps help us there. But we should also be mindful that we are not only pushing for a kind of a high-end solutions and only focusing on the big chunks of the network or the architecture, but we should also deploy, I think, kind of easy checklists for developers of applications who might not have the access to lawyers and perhaps the laboratories to test their products for the highest assurance, but kind of the basic stuff. What are the 10 golden rules that you should keep in mind if you want to develop an app, for example, from a cybersecurity point of view?
Yeah.
And the second part, I think there is, and there I hope really that the Cybersecurity Competence Center and Network can help, is to look at the innovative solutions and their deployment in the market in a way that, and if you look at the SMEs and the small business sectors, they normally are not thinking themselves or let's say developing all their products or services themselves. They probably buy something. They look at the little components and it helps if all these chunks that they put together are already cyber secure. We had a news today regarding one legacy protocol and the vulnerabilities there. I mean, let's try to make sure that what we built today is secure, cyber secure by design, so that people use it tomorrow or the day after tomorrow for different purposes, that there are no, or that, let's say, the vulnerabilities are mitigated as much as possible.
And I think that it's a very good point, and I think that we all have a role to play on this ecosystem where we involve SMEs. because SMEs are probably one of the weakest points where they have highest risk because they have less skills to protect themselves in many cases. But also there are a lot of SMEs in the cyberspace that we could help. And we as a larger company, we would like to be part of that kind of European championship again, in which we rise the level of the cybersecurity knowledge and capabilities in Europe, where we have large players like us and also a number of SMEs that could really enhance the capabilities, but also create new employment opportunities and so on. Yeah.
And maybe just to continue there and add just one small point, that also to looking at cybersecurity not only as a tech issue, but also as a process issue, like really coming down to that, looking at the whole architecture and really security by design, as Johan was also mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, security by design should be self-evident, but then who is putting the requirement? What is secure by design in practical terms? So it's not just the technical solution, but the weakest links are the people. So we have to look at it in a comprehensive manner, like Nina said, the procedures, the technologies, and then of course our human links. So how we educate our people, and this should be one of the European strengths, because I think on education level we are the global leader anyway. But in cybersecurity education, I'm afraid we are not the global leader. So cyber hygiene, which was mentioned by Johan, that's something we should be. It should be also be self-evident. So the companies like in Finland, they provide medical services for the laborers. So they should also provide cyber hygiene for the laborers. It should be in a way a requirement if you are working for a company that the company is providing your cyber hygiene, because then you can really put requirements to your people, and then you can rely on the people if they are well educated. So I mean, cyber education is also respond to the lack of expertise. What we are saying, I don't think we have lack of expertise, because easily we can train our people to become a cyber expert on different sectors of cybersecurity. They are not just a technical expert, but there are other kinds of expertise. And this is also where we could do a lot, and this is actually the fast line for Europe to be more competitive, to improve the cyber hygiene and the education system in cyber, because the starting point is pretty good in every European country.
And if I make a very quick challenge to Johan, I think you have an opportunity, Johan, from ENISA with the Cybersecurity Act, because rather than waiting for schemes on certification to come to you, you can push us to create those schemes faster.
So you have challenged. You have been now more and more challenged.
More and more people looking for me.
Yeah,
but there is a good point there. The way that a good certification scheme is built up is in cooperation together with the industry. It cannot be somewhere else.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that industry is really looking also to ENISA to drive the way to be one of the pillars for the recovery after the COVID. So good luck.
We try to do our best.
Lina, you wanted to add something quickly? There is 1 minute left, maybe. You want to say something else, maybe? Lina?
Just to comment, I mean, we also be supporting Johan and ENISA, and there should be a clear political mandate. So there are many things easily to be done, like the cyber task force was mentioned. But you should have the clear political mandate, and I think that's one of the obstacles at the moment. That not that clear.
Operational cooperation now is part of the mandate of ENISA. So this is taken care of.
Yeah, this is great, but it has to be strong. Otherwise, you are not able to act in an appropriate way.
And parties need to have a will to do that. But I think what this crisis also showed, that there is an added value at the European level action and proactive action as well. And this is something that everybody recognizes.
Okay, so thanks for the discussion. I think we are closing to the end. So I think that just the last words, we have seen that, well, the main topic, I would say, apart from we spoke about SME, the fragmentation, the need really to share information, the call for ENISA to be among the leader in the recovery, and indeed the fact that public and private should really work together, share information, and go together for the new European ecosystem. So thank you everybody for having participated.
Thank you very much.